Today I'm going to talk about opportunities for reuse and recycling of bulky waste. We haven't heard a lot about this particular waste stream at the conference, although Ian from Auckland City Council did highlight some opportunities and some challenges that are being faced in New Zealand. So what I thought I'd do today is run through bulky waste. What is it? And what materials are typically being presented on the curb for collection by councils? And what sort of services are being provided across New South Wales in particular. We'll also look at trends in collection and management of bulky waste and some of the findings from some of our audits which we've done in New South Wales and also South Australia in terms of trends, and we'll wrap up with some possible sort of program and policy options. So bulky waste, what is it? Well, it's a pretty broad term and you can find just about everything on a curb during a council clean-up. But generally what those materials do include, they include white goods, garden organics, mattresses, furniture, timber, both treated and untreated, general waste in bags commonly, building waste, carpet textiles, plastics and some really interesting other materials which can go bang, which we've seen in the past. So generally bulky waste curbside collections are an opportunity for householders to clean out those things they've got in their, stored underneath the house or in the garden shed or in their garage, and we do find a whole range of materials typically being presented for collection. So how common are these services in New South Wales? Well, they're very extensive. In fact, in Sydney, or I should say across the state, 87% of households and almost 90% of the population is covered by some form of bulky waste curbside clean-up collection. And in Sydney, every council has some form of bulky waste collection. And also with the areas in the extended regulated area in the Hunter and Illawarra, as well as up and down the coast in the regional regulated areas, and a little less common in the rest of the state. But bulky curbside waste cleanups are a fairly mature form of waste collection offered by councils to their residents. So, looking at the numbers, this tells an interesting story. So how much bulky waste is generated and recovered in New South Wales? I think bulky waste is one of the poor cousins to other waste materials which have received a lot more focus from councils in terms of collection and recovery. So over the last 8 years, this is statewide data we're looking at here, from 2005-06 through to 2012-13. You can see that red line here being the tonnages of curbside bulky waste collected, and it's increasing. It's increasing at a fairly rapid rate from about 140,000 tonnes per year to just over 210,000 tonnes. So what we also have here is the amount actually sent to landfill and the amount recovered. So you see the amount recovered there is pretty much flat. It's increasing a little bit, so therefore the amount actually going into disposal into landfill is actually increasing. So at a state level, generation's increasing by about 10,000 tonnes per year, and that equates to just over 7% increase in generation. And overall, bulky waste makes up about 7% of all municipal waste to landfill. So the story is there's some major opportunities for improving the recovery and reuse of this material. So this chart shows the recovery rates of bulky waste across New South Wales the last 8 years, and you can see the recovery rate is generally, increasing, albeit from a very low starting point of around about just under 15%, up and down a little bit, and round about 24% at a state level. And that's well behind the municipal resource recovery rate of 52% across the state. So there's some major opportunities to recover more bulky waste across New South Wales. Okay, so what are the drivers for bulky waste generation? I think the big factor that we've looked at, and that there are other factors, it's we're becoming a very rich society, and we've really gained some benefit from a lot of cheap imported goods from overseas. So you can see on this chart here of total waste, bulky waste being collected per year against gross annual disposable income. So you can see over the last 8 years across New South Wales, as generally households have become more wealthy in terms of the amount of disposable income, so has bulky waste generation. Apart from a little glitch, and we all remember this, the global financial crisis, where perhaps householders held on to their bulky waste for a little bit longer. Maybe they put it in the garage before the big clean-up, but it tells a story that that as households increase in disposable income, so does their turnover of lounges, white goods and other items in their household. So in terms of collection trends across New South Wales, there's a large range of services. They're certainly not standardised, and they certainly depends on the needs of the community. But from our audits across New South Wales and also interstate, what we found is most councils tend to offer scheduled collections of between 2 and 4 a year, and generally residents are encouraged to place their bulky waste on the curb, usually on the weekend before collections. Some councils are offering on-call collections as well, in addition to the scheduled pickups, and their use depends on whether a resident lives in a single dwelling or a multi-unit dwelling. And a lot of councils have clear specifications around what can be placed on the curb and what can't be, but residents tend to not follow that particularly well. The volume being presented tends to vary between about 1 and 3 cubic metres, although councils tend to set guidelines around that, and a lot of the residual waste sitting on the curb after informal, reuse and scavenging material tends to be loaded into rear-loaded compaction vehicles. So the type of allowable materials that we've found in most council collections tend to include household furniture, small appliances, soft furnishings, carpet and lino, as well as mattresses and different foam materials and other non-recyclable household items. And often in collections, white goods and other metal items such as fridges, washing machines and dryers are also included. The type of materials which aren't accepted include general household garbage, which we see quite a lot of in bags placed on the curb, a lot of vegetation or garden organics and other materials, and as well as some nasties like car batteries, building materials, paints, chemicals, vibro, sometimes asbestos, gas bottles, other hazardous materials, and sometimes large leftovers from renovation projects, including glass windows, shower screens and that sort of material. So in terms of the recent audits that we've completed across New South Wales and South Australia, we've audited almost 6,000 households, so we've got a pretty extensive data set. That's included 44 councils. So across all those audits, the objectives of councils tend to vary in terms of the questions they tend to want answered, and that can vary from the amount, type and proportion of materials in the clean-up stream, and what are the potentially reusable and recyclable materials in that as well. And councils are particularly interested in the diversion rate if they included programs to support householders to place out the correct materials and also enable the reuse and recovery of those materials as well. And in some of our more recent audits, some councils have been very interested in the calorific value or the energy content of those waste materials as well to inform future projects. So what does the data look like? Oops. So in terms of the overall size of cleanups, this is some typical data from some of our audits. And as I said, most of the piles of materials placed on the curb tend to be in the smaller category, up to 1 to 2 cubic metres, and they tend to dominate. You do get some householders having a really super big clean-up and tend to exceed council guidelines in some cases. In terms of the typical weights, this is where the data can actually vary quite substantially between single dwellings and multi-unit dwellings. So on the left here we have the kilograms per household of waste tend to be placed on the curb. So you can see on-call services, single dwellings, they really get rid of stuff when they make an on-call collection from council. However, it's not as popular with multi-unit dwellings in terms of accessing that service typically. Whereas with scheduled services, single dwellings do generate a lot more bulky waste than multi-unit dwellings. So what does all this bulky waste contain? So the top sort of 4 materials in bulky waste tend to include furniture, wood, vegetation and e-waste. But what's actually quite incredible is that just over 22% of that material by weight is stuff that shouldn't be there. And it's quite incredible that e-waste is presenting in quite a significant proportion in council cleanups at just over 7% by weight. And we've got a federal collection scheme for this material, so there's no excuse for that material to be placed on the curb and potentially impacting on recovery options for other materials. Building waste is pretty common as well, including garden organics and also hazardous waste such as paints, oils and other materials which should be dropped off at council clean-out events or community recycling centres. So when you look at the data by volume, it tells a similar story, although mattresses tend to pop up as one of those significant material by volume, but by weight they don't really register that much on the radar. So by volume, the top 3 materials tends to be furniture, vegetation, then mattresses. And once again, those materials that shouldn't be there are highlighted there as well. So it's the same for materials which do present significantly by volume. So what does this all mean? Well, one of the central questions that obviously councils want to answer is what sort of potential recovery can they achieve if there were some better reuse and recycling programs established to help residents manage those materials better. So on the left-hand side there, you can see single dwellings. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I've just skipped a slide. So in terms of the materials which can be suitable for reuse, one of the big components of there includes mattresses and furniture, which can be recovered. And in terms of recyclable materials, that includes vegetation and also paper and cardboard, which are presented in significant quantities. In terms of problematic components, which are presented in council cleanups which could be recovered, once again it's mainly e-waste. And in terms of building materials, some of the main recoverable materials are obviously wood, which comprises the majority of that stream. So when you look at the potential recovery options for those materials, recycling rates can be boosted quite substantially if there are programs in place for those materials. So once again, by targeting furniture, e-waste, vegetation, paper and cardboard in particular, this could actually lift resource recovery rates from, typically in some councils in the mid to high teens to well over 40%. And that is a consistent story between single dwellings and multi-unit dwellings as well. So some major opportunities in this space into the future, I think, here. So one of the most important things in terms of opportunities is getting better data. We've got a pretty good data set, but councils are only just starting to really think seriously about auditing what's actually ending up in the curbside and what sort of programs can be put in place to better recover or reuse those materials. And clearly, community education is a real opportunity, and it is a priority. Given that 20% by weight of materials being placed on the curb for clean-up really shouldn't be there. So on the right there, you actually see a very recent community newspaper ad that North City Council's actually put into their local paper about no more e-waste on the curb or in the bin. So they're trying to cut through to the community to motivate the correct behaviours. There's obviously opportunities for better working with the community to encourage them to use the existing TV and computer recycling schemes in place, and also to use the clean outs and the community recycling centres, which are pretty much available across the whole state now. But one of the big opportunities, and even more so in Sydney, is that significant investment is really needed in repair and reuse infrastructure. It's a little bit different in the regions where a lot of community-based organisations are actually involved in the repair and reuse of bulky materials, particularly furniture and the likes. But in Sydney in particular, there's a real gap, and we feel that there's significant opportunities for further investment to recover that material. And once again, I think there's some really good opportunities for community-based organisations, as Ian highlighted, in New Zealand this morning, to be involved in this sector. And one of the last opportunities, obviously, with the materials that can't be easily reused or recycled, there's some major opportunities with potential energy from waste applications. So that's a quick run through some recent work we've done in curbside audits with bulky waste, and I hope that was interesting. Thank you.